Sup everyone, Thomas here, aka Restrooms Trainer, and welcome back to another one of my videos. So 2024, huh? Quite a lot's happened this year, for better or worse, including a bunch of great games being released. So I thought it would be an interesting idea to cover my top 5 favourite games that came out this year. And you guys seem to be interested in seeing it as well. And who knows, if this video does well enough, I might even make this a yearly thing. A few things before we get started though. 1. This list is my opinion, and is based on my own experience with these games. 2. I'll only be counting games that A. came out this year, obviously. B. I have actually played, so if you were expecting Black Myth Wukong, forget it. And C. I have actually finished. So as much as I would like to include games like Nine Souls or the Monster Hunter Stories remaster, I still haven't beaten them yet, so they won't be considered. Another thing worth mentioning is that remasters and remakes are being counted. Also, before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe, it would really help this channel out, as we're already over halfway to 1,000 subscribers. Please and thank you. But with all that being said, let's get started with Number 5. Mario and Luigi Brothership. So I'm sure I'm not the only one who was excited to see a new entry in the Mario and Luigi series, since we haven't gotten a new game in 6 years. 9 if you exclude remakes. So the question is, does it hold up compared to its predecessors? Well, in my opinion, it absolutely does. Brothership finally brings the series to full 3D, and it looks really good in my opinion. Another thing I really like about this game is its overarching theme of connections. Whether that be connecting the scattered islands that make up Concordia, or the social connections, or bonds, between people. Whether that be the bond between a student and mentor, the bond between a group of friends, or most importantly, the brotherly bond between Mario and Luigi, hence the name, Brothership. And this theme of connections even extends to the design of the characters. Most of the residents of Concordia have faces that resemble a power outlet, while the main antagonists and their goons resemble different chords, like a HDMI cord or an aux cord. So while this is a great game, it does have its problems. For starters, while the combat for the most part is great, there is one problem that, while minor, is quite annoying. So anyone who's played any of the previous games will know that you control Mario with A and Luigi with B. This is the case in both combat and the overworld. However, in this game for some reason, Luigi's combat menu uses A, and I don't know why. Made even weirder by the fact that you still use B to attack. And while on the topic of combat, the battle plug system. This adds a variety of effects to battles, like turning basic attacks into AoEs, or dropping a surprise spike ball. While the idea is cool, I do think it should have been introduced a bit early into the game. Another thing I want to discuss is that while I genuinely think this game does a good job at pacing itself early on, remaining quite fun, towards the end of the game, there are very few new islands introduced, and a lot of the late game is filled with backtracking to older islands, which felt like the game was dragging itself out unnecessarily. So while this game does have its flaws, I do still think that this is a great game, and a worthy addition to the Mario and Luigi series. Number 4. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. So my experience with the Paper Mario series prior to this was these 3 games. And let me just say this now, I very much enjoyed both Sticker Star and Color Splash. I think both are overhated. Like, I get why some people dislike them, but they're not bad games. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that I never really got a chance to play any of the classic Paper Mario games. So when a remake of The Thousand Year Door was released, it gave me an opportunity to experience what many consider the best in the series. And well, While I do still personally prefer the newer games, I can absolutely see why this game is so beloved. This game is full of so many unique areas, from Glitzville to Twilight Town to Rogueport itself. Each of these areas feels different from the last, with tons of little areas to explore, tons of different enemies to battle, and a ton of unique characters to meet and interact with. One of the best parts about this game are all the unique party members you meet along the way, all of which have their own personalities and unique abilities that are used to solve all sorts of puzzles in the overworld. Koops can grab items and hit switches, Flo can reveal hidden secrets, and the baby Yoshi can flutter jump to help cross gaps. By the way, out of complete curiosity, what did everyone else name their Yoshi? I called mine Little Yoshi if anyone's curious. Anyway, every party member has unique skills they can use in battle too. My personal favourite is Greenpath's Tattle ability, which I made sure to use on absolutely every enemy and boss I could, because having a visible HP bar was very nice. Speaking of battling, all the battles in this game take place on a theatre stage, audience included. Not only is this unique, but they take it further by having the audience sometimes interfere with the battle itself, by trying to throw stuff at Mario and Co, or causing something to fall from the ceiling. And some of the bosses will even interact with the audience in unique ways. Like the first major boss of the game, Hooktail, who will straight up eat some of the audience to recover some of her health after you've kicked her ass enough. So while there's a lot of good in this game, there are some things that I personally don't like all that much. First off is how low all the numbers are when it comes to battling. Now what I mean by that is that most of your attacks in this game usually do 1 or 2 damage. Now this is balanced out by the fact that most enemy health bars aren't that massive either. Hooktail for example only has 20 HP, although it's arguably 30 when you account for the whole Toad buffet, but that's beside the point. So by comparison, doing 1 or 2 damage doesn't seem too weird, and lower numbers do simplify things to an extent. Though comparing it to other RPGs like Xenoblade, Pokemon and even Mario and Luigi, if I was doing 1 or 2 damage in any of those games, then I'm definitely doing something wrong. Now obviously, this isn't exactly a fair comparison, since as I said, the damage isn't too bizarre in comparison to the HP bars. But as someone who is more used to playing RPGs with those bigger numbers, playing something with such low numbers feels off. Now just a reminder that this is entirely my opinion, and you are entirely free to disagree with it, as everyone has different opinions. Now to avoid spoilers, yes I know this game is almost as old as I am, I'm going to be a bit vague here, but another thing I didn't particularly like was that near the very end of the game, you're forced to do 2 boss fights back to back, and neither of them are particularly easy. Now I personally got this first try, but I've seen quite a few people complain about this, and I don't blame them, especially since you can only carry so many healing items. Speaking of which, another thing I didn't like was that you could only carry 15 items. Now yes, I know you can increase it to 20 by getting a certain item in the Pit of 100 Trials, but 1, that thing is on floor 50, and 2, only increasing it by 5 doesn't seem like a massive improvement. Now despite all I've said, most of these issues are incredibly minor, and I still very much enjoyed this game, but there are other games I like more. Number 3. The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. After nearly 4 decades of this franchise, we finally have a Zelda game where you play as Zelda herself. Well, unless you count Spirit Tracks, and Cadence of Hyrule, and both Hyrule Warriors games, and then there's the CDI games. But aside from those, we finally have a mainline Zelda game where Zelda is the main protagonist. Now obviously, Zelda isn't Link, so you can't fight enemies the same way as every other Zelda game, where you go ham on them with a sword. Most of the time at least. Instead, Zelda goes the summoner route, with the ultimate power, copy and paste. Zelda can copy just about every item and enemy in the game, either to solve puzzles, or fight enemies on her behalf. The best way to describe this game is, what if we took the Link's Awakening remake, put it in the Hyrule from A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds, and added the creative freedom from Tears of the Kingdom, which works quite well in my opinion. Most puzzles in this game don't have a single intended solution, instead allowing you to come up with your own solutions. If you wanted to cross the gap, you could summon a P-hat and glide across. Or let's be honest, you built a bridge of beds. Cause let's face it, the old bed is without question the most useful echo in the game. It's found early on, it has a cheap cost, and you can sleep in it to heal yourself. Though all this freedom does come with a slight drawback. Although not as open as Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, given that you're able to reach just about every spot on the map, it's incredibly easy to get lost or sidetracked, since it's not always obvious what the intended path is. Now a lot of the time, you can just make your own path, but for areas like Holy Mount Lanayru, it took me a while to realise where I was meant to go. Something that I wasn't a massive fan of though, was the stealth sections in this game. Now there aren't too many required ones, but something you should know about me is that I'm really not a fan of stealth sections in the games I play. At least if it's forced. Something I did like about this game though, was the Steel World. Everything those rifts have been sucking up across Hyrule gets sent here, to this dimension where time stands still. All of the game's dungeons are located here, so there are some smaller rifts across Hyrule that you can enter whenever you want to help rescue all the tries, which can help power up the Tri-Rod. So while I absolutely love this game, and genuinely think it should have at least been nominated for Game of the Year, I'm not even sure if this would crack the top 5 for my favourite Zelda games, as I would definitely be more likely to pick up Breath of the Wild or Twilight Princess for a replay again than this. Number 2. Sonic Shadow Generations. So over the past couple of years, I've been getting into the Sonic series. I even bought the collection on Steam, and for the most part, I really enjoyed them. Yes, even that one. And Sonic Generations was definitely one of the highlights. So seeing that it was getting a remaster had me intrigued. And I thought it was pretty good for the most part. They changed a lot of the dialogue, which, while a lot of people weren't a fan of, I personally liked the change. And that wasn't the only change. Now, as someone who has gotten all the achievements in the original Sonic Generations, I remembered where most, if not all, the collectibles were. So it was cool to see that they added another collectible. Chows. In each stage, you can find 3 hidden chows. And what's cool is that every one is actually unique, instead of just being a copy and paste. Like this one looks like Amy, and this one has the pumpkin head. So overall, I thought the Sonic Generations remaster was pretty good. But let's face it, that's not what you're here for. Let's talk about Shadow Generations. So I know it was a joke, but this game does have some similarities to Bowser's Fury. Both are new games that got bundled with an already existing game. Both games have a sort of open area for its hub world, and both worlds start out limited, but expand as you continue through the story. But that's beside the point. This game takes place parallel to Sonic Generations, and basically revolves around Black Doom's return, and Shadow trying to stop him. The game follows a similar premise, where you revisit stages from Shadow's past in previous games, though they also took the opportunity to add in stages from games that came out after the original generations, like Forces and Frontiers. And despite those games being in the future chronologically, it's still justified as the result of time and space being screwed with. Even though Shadow never went to Chaos Island. I don't know, maybe something will happen in the comics or future games. Something cool about these stages is that in some of them, Black Doom basically says, how can I make this about Radical Highway? Which is fair because, Radical Highway is just so cool. I mean, he grinds down the suspension cables like whoosh, and then the fighter just come in and drop bombs like pew, pew, pew. And then he dodges them, and then he enters the building with the springs. Oh my god, it's so cool! Reference aside, yeah, in some of the stages, you suddenly get taken to Radical Highway for a bit before returning. And that's not to mention that Radical Highway has its own stage as well. And all the stages in this game are quite good. If you want my personal ranking from best to worst, Radical Highway, Chaos Island, Space Colony Arc, Sunset Heights, Kingdom Valley, and Rail Canyon. Now, one minor problem I had is that the stages definitely felt a bit too long at first, but I got used to it eventually. Another thing that Sonic Shadow Generations absolutely nails is its soundtrack. It just sounds so good. Some of my personal favourites are Chaos Island Act 1, Sunset Heights Act 1, Space Colony Arc Act 1, and Radical Highway. Just Radical Highway. Like, the soundtrack is something that even the bad Sonic games tend to get right. This is legitimately rivaling Forces and Frontiers for my favourite Sonic OST. The bosses in this game are also a highlight. Metal Overlord and Memphis, Tennessee were quite fun, and I will try to avoid spoilers, but the final boss of this game might just be one of my favourite final bosses in gaming. Right up there with the Demon Dragon from Tears of the Kingdom, the Radiance from Hollow Knight, or Guys Gorn from Ozana Rise Sunbreak. But this game isn't flawless. Something I wasn't a huge fan of was the fact that you're forced to do all the challenge stages to progress. In Sonic Generations, you only needed to complete one challenge act per area to get the boss key, but here, you need to do all of them, and some of them can be quite tricky. So while this is absolutely a fantastic game, there's one game that came out this year that I enjoyed just a bit more, and I doubt any of you will probably guess it. Number 1. Another Crab's Treasure. So I imagine a lot of you watching probably haven't even heard of this game, since this isn't made by a big publisher like Nintendo or Sega. This is an indie game, made by a small group called Aggro Crab. And fun fact, this is only their second game ever. And for a second game, they hit it out of the park. Now those of you who have been following my channel for a while, might remember that I made a review of this game not long after the game came out. In it, I gave the game a 4 out of 5, but after a few updates and bug fixes, I am confidently bumping it up to a 4.5 out of 5. Now for those who know nothing about this game, despite its bright cartoony look, this is actually a Souls-like. You play as Krill, a hermit crab on a quest to retrieve his beloved shell that was taken from him as a result of committing the worst crime imaginable. Tax evasion. I am completely serious right now. Now being a Souls-like, you'd expect it to be as difficult as one, and it is. But something that this game has that others don't, is customizable difficulty. Think the enemies are dealing too much damage? Well, you can reduce that. Want more wireframes? Sure. And if you're really struggling, you could say, give him a gun that one-shots everything including bosses. This is actually something that's in the game and I love it. Speaking of bosses, this game has some great bosses that are simultaneously fun and challenging, like Archaea, the Intimidation Crab, Magister, the Tyrant of Slacktide, and my personal favourite, Grovekeeper Toppiter, which might legitimately be one of my favourite boss fights of all time. Another thing I think this game does well is its soundtrack. Both the boss themes and area themes sound great, and really manage to match the tone of where you are or what boss you're fighting. the music in this game has so much variety and still manages to not feel out of place. I'd recommend going and checking some of the OST out yourself when you have the time. It's on Spotify if anyone's curious. Now the main gimmick of this game that helps it stand out from other Souls-likes is the shell system. Throughout the game, you can find a wide variety of different items to use as shells, and each one has a different shell spell. Some are attacks, some protect you, and others can even heal you. And each one of these shells have their own stats. Some are durable, others aren't. Some are quite heavy and restrict how fast you can dodge, others are light and let you dodge quite quickly, and some allow you to roll around and even gain momentum when going down a slope. Now you might have noticed that a lot of these shells look like everyday items, and that's because this game has a heavy theme on how much we're polluting the ocean. You can find trash everywhere in this game. Hell, the currency in this game is microplastics. And all this pollution is shown to negatively affect the creatures living down here, turning them into a kind of zombie in a way. Another thing I like is just how varied and unique the different areas are. Although few in number, the areas are decently large and fun to explore. From the lush greens of the expired grove, to the trash-riddled poison swamp that is Flotsam Vale, to the vast emptiness of the sands between. And yes, that name is a reference to the lands between from Elden Ring. In fact, this game is full of references. You can either find or buy costumes for Krill, that range from Cult of the Lamb, to Mr. Krabs, to Bespero Solaire from Dark Souls. And another Dark Souls reference can be found near the end of the game, in the form of a certain familiar looking shell. And did I forget to mention who lives in the pineapple under the sea? I feel like I could go on and on about this game, so I'll stop myself here. While it's not perfect, and not everyone will agree with me, I feel confident in saying that Another Crab's Treasure is my personal game of the year. And Aggro Crab, if you're watching this, I look forward to any future sequels or DLC. Though please take your time with this, because you absolutely cooked with this one. And there we have it, my top 5 games of 2024. But obviously, this is just my opinion, and everyone's going to have a different top 5. But let me know what you thought down in the comments. What are some of your favourite games of this year? And do you want to see me make this a yearly thing? But that's going to do it for me here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment any video ideas you want to see me make in the future. Have a great day everyone, and I'll see you all in the next video. See ya!